everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Peace of Mind at Health Assured. I'm Sofia, one of the lead counsellors, and today we're going to be talking about how you can better manage stress in your life. I think that stress is something that we've all experienced at some point in our life, and I think we know that stress is also something that we can really struggle with as well. So to go more into this topic, to understand more about stress, exactly what it is, and looking at ways for you to better manage it, I'm here with one of our wellbeing counsellors, Addy. Hi Addy, thanks so much for coming down today and talking about this topic with me. Do you want to just start by telling us a bit about yourself and about your job as a counsellor?
Yeah, so I've worked at Health Assured for around about, I don't know, 8 months now.
Yeah.
Passed my probation a couple of months ago.
Woo.
Thank you. So yeah, and I've been working on the digital wellbeing team alongside yourself, of course. And yeah, I have a background in psychotherapy, a lot of mental health research as well.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the thing that we're talking about, stress, is something that, as counsellors, we all have a lot of experience in dealing with, not only on a personal level, but on a professional level as well. So yeah, really keen to discuss it with you.
Of course, yeah. And like you were saying just then, Addy, a lot of the people that come to us, I think stress is definitely one of the most common things that people come with.
Mm-hmm.
And they can come from it from lots of different areas of your life. And we actually have some stats here before we get started, but Burnout Report UK have said that 91% of adults in the UK have reported that they experience high or extreme levels of stress at some point in the past year. And we know as well from YouGov that 74% of people that have actually reported to have had stress have said that it's felt overwhelming and they found it really difficult to cope. So we know how much people are struggling with this, and to make sure we're all on the same playing field, to make sure we all know exactly what this definition is, from your experience, from your clinical experience, can you tell us a bit of an overview about stress?
Stress is just your a combination of both psychological and biological responses to something that is threatening, uncomfortable, distressing, and it's basically a generic system as well. So all those different types of stressors, you can have physical stress, mental stress, emotional stress, work stress. Those are your external stresses. Internally, the stress response system is quite generic, so it doesn't differentiate between emotional stress and physical stress. It just responds to something, to pressure that's being exerted upon the mind and body. And that's why it's so difficult to become unstressed or de-stressed when you're in a state of stress, when you're in a state of panic, because it sets off a whole wave of psychological but also biological processes that need to work their way through the body before you calm down again.
Yeah.
So it's obviously a complex thing that takes place. Very common, obviously, but it's very complex and requires a lot.
Yeah, of course. There's a lot happening in your body. What's psychological is also biological, and we know it activates your fight or flight response. And I think it was a good point you said there about it's basically your reaction to challenging events. So any sort of difficult thing that comes up. So for example, we know that we can get stressed from a variety of different reasons. So it could be catastrophic, so some massive unfortunate event like war or the pandemic might happen that can cause huge amounts of stress. We know it can also just be the everyday things. You might feel it on a less intense level, but a little bit every day that can be really detrimental to your health. Being late for work, I'm sure we've all been there.
I have. I haven't been there, not yet.
No, not yet. You passed your probation now, so yeah. So it can also be in the everyday things. So for example, being late for work, having those arguments or tension within your family every day. It can also be, of course, down to big life changes that might be happening, losing your job, losing someone, and the list kind of goes on. And I suppose you mentioned before, but we know that it's a very common thing that people sort of come with into the room. And from, I guess, the people that you've worked with, Addy, what would you say are the most common symptoms that come up when it comes to stress?
Mainly stress that leads to dysfunction or impairment in their day-to-day life, meaning that the like stress, obviously we'll talk about it in a bit more detail. Stress is generally good. day-to-day stress that you experience. You talked about work-related stress, the stress of being around somebody new, you don't know them, you're feeling a bit alert and a bit self-conscious. You're a bit more careful about what you say. Not necessarily bad things. And stress, when it's controlled, when it's predictable, when it's moderate, is good for you, because it encourages you to be at your best performance and try new things and push yourself out your comfort zone and learn stuff. But it's when stress becomes, first of all, severe, uncontrolled and unpredictable, and too many times, that's when it leads to all kinds of problems related to anxiety, related to depression, because you're too worked up that you're not doing well in life, you're not talking well, you're not performing well. It leads to feelings of dissatisfaction and so forth. And it's that kind of stress where it's too much and it's repeated and it's over time, where you people like you and I work with, where it's just gone on for so long and it's too severe. And at that point, there's a lot of work to do, because stress has damaged people's self-esteem, damaged people's relationships, damaged people's health, damaged people's work performance. And it's at that point where you have to say, come on, this is too much. We need to work on the causes of this stress and try to figure out some coping mechanisms for it.
Exactly. So, yeah. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because you're saying there that stress isn't a bad thing. Like, it can be good, it can be used to our benefit, but it can also be really detrimental to us. And we've sort of seen it in like our experience, like how much people can really struggle and suffer with it. It can affect all areas of your life. And I mean, we can sort of break that down into two types of stress. So there's good stress and bad stress. So the bad stress is what you spoke about how, things feel overwhelming, things feel like they're out of our control, things feel too anxious. And that's normally when we've pushed ourselves too far. That sort of, if you carry on down that stress, you'd lead to burnout. So that's the bad type of stress. And like you were saying, it can be chronic. I think I guess if we're looking at the technical terms, it's stress that's longer than 21 days. That's classed as chronic stress. And that's a lot of strain that you're putting your body under, the longer that you're holding on to that stress, and you're not really having that way of relief from it. So that can be really detrimental for your health. But then there's also the good stress, which is also called eustress, or adaptive stress, eustress or adaptive stress. And this is the type of stress that helps you grow as an individual. So I think we know that, when I think what's important to note about that type of stress is that it feels within your coping methods. So it feels like you're being challenged a bit, but it doesn't feel like you're being pushed too far, and it can be really motivating and encouraging to do that. So, when you've got an exam coming up, for example, and you can kind of get those excited nerves, maybe not for an exam, but maybe for like a presentation that you're doing at work or something exciting, you feel nervous but excited. That's an example of the good type of stress. Yeah.
Definitely, Sophia. Because you hear stress and it obviously has negative connotations. I'm worked up, my heart's racing and so forth. But as you said, it gets you in that stage of being alert. You're pressing, you're pushing against the boundaries of what you used to be able to do and what you can do. And also with respects to stress as well, talked about like being pushed to, achieve more and be better and so forth. Stress, as I said at the beginning, our stress response system is generic. So basically, if we subject our minds and bodies to moderate levels of stress, where it's controlled and it's not getting too much, it builds up resilience over time. So our ability to handle stress in future grows. But if we don't do that, if we don't subject ourselves to those moderate levels of stress, our resilience doesn't improve in that respect. So yeah, there's really good aspects to stress. Improving immune system over time as well. If you do exercise, you're subjecting your body to physical stress. You do that over and over again in moderate levels and repeatedly. Your ability to handle not only physical stress but also emotional stress improves. So yeah, I mean, it's good that we're touching upon the positive aspects of stress, use stress, because I do think they are neglected a lot in discussions about it.
We want to use stress to our advantage, right? Because if you've come onto this and you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to eliminate all my stress, it's literally not possible.
Yeah.
You know, because it's biologically wired in us to have that. You know, we can even like go back in the day. Same with anxiety as well. We have it in our blood for a reason. So, for example, if there's an oncoming danger coming off, like there's a bear coming towards you, you're going to feel stress and anxiety because it's going to push your fight or flight response into moving away from that perceived threat. Mm-hmm. But I think nowadays there's stress all over us, right? Especially in work. You know, I think a lot of people have their work emails open all the time. You hear that Teams message, you hear that ding, and you might feel that surge of anxiety and stress. And have you noticed, because you've been a counsellor for a while now, have you noticed an increase of people coming to you that have been really struggling with stress in recent years?
I have, Sofia, particularly since the pandemic. You quoted statistics there. What did you say? 91% of UK adults experience burnout in the last 2 years. It's unsurprising, and it's affecting certain groups more than others. Mm-hmm. Women, for example, are twice as likely as men to experience burnout. The pressures certain groups face on a day-to-day basis is, becoming too much for them to deal with. So much so that they come to people like us to manage young people, especially. Maybe you know this, but like young people under the age of 25, they are most likely than any other group, and previous generations as well, to have mental health related sick days. They're more likely to call in work saying like, I can't come in because my anxiety is too much. So as a society, it's obviously getting worse. The stress people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis, it seems to be getting worse, but also their ability to handle that stress also seems to be diminishing, particularly among young people. So yeah, it is, and it's obviously really difficult to work with, because you can kind of work on the cognitive aspects of stress, the things that the cognitive and behavioral aspects of stress, the thing that they're doing and thinking about themselves that are maybe contributing to, them feeling this way. Mm-hmm. But if they're subjected to so much environmental stress, work-related stress, family stress, there's obviously so much you can do in the therapy room. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So it is a challenge. It is very much a challenge, therapeutically, and there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
when they become.
Yeah, and I think with the younger generation as well, I think environmentally there's a lot more external pressure to achieve things, and I think especially in hand with that, with also social media, and it sounds like as well you've also noticed that people just aren't as resilient to being able to actually manage their mental health effectively. And I think when you put all of that together, we're met with these statistics, we're met with people struggling more and more with this.
Yeah,
not only is the environment different, but people also struggling managing it.
Definitely, Sophia, you said it beautifully there, with respects to this combination of not being able to manage it well, not being resilient in that respect, and there's been an increase in external stressors, money, job, and all that kind of stuff. But you are right about the resilience thing, and one of the reasons why psychologists think that young people especially are less resilient than perhaps my generation is because because of the increased use of smartphones and so forth, social media, people are not going out as much. Yeah. They're on the phones instead of going out and meeting people. When you go out and meet people, you take risks. You all that thing that we were talking about before, Sophia, eustress, positive stress. People experience that when they see new people. Mm-hmm. They put themselves in a risky position. They may get rejected. They may get knocked back. This is all good stress because it's puts your body in a state of alert, makes you take risks. If you fail or if you succeed, you learn how to cope with it. Young people growing up in the age of smartphones haven't done that as much as perhaps my generation have. Yeah. So their stress response systems haven't been utilized as much in the way that previous generations have. So as a consequence to that, yes, there's wide range of reports that they're less resilient in that respect.
Yeah.
That on top of all the stuff that you said about, environmental pressure leads to this really, really difficult situation for young people.
Yeah, of course. And that was a really good point that you've made there about, I think, isolation. We're a much more of an isolated society now. And you said at the start that we've also seen higher levels of stress due to the pandemic. And we know how much of an isolating time that was. And I think that really set people back.
Definitely.
And it really knocks on their resilience. And I think if you are struggling with stress as well, sometimes it might not be something that you're always that conscious of, because you might be so used to being on high alert all the time, having your sympathetic nervous system just always activated because of like life stresses, unfortunately. And I think sometimes we don't always cope well with it. And what would you say are some of the unhealthy ways that people can cope with stress? Either consciously or subconsciously, you might not even realise you're doing it.
I think you said the first one there, Sophia, isolation.
Yeah.
People just, I think we all do it, including myself. I know I differentiate myself from the younger generation, but I do this now. Shut people out.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like when we get worked up, when we get anxious, and when we get overwhelmed with stuff, we just say, forget everyone, I'm going home. Got to smash my phone for a bit, doom scroll, just do things that are obviously not going to facilitate healing, facilitate connection. I think people isolate themselves more than they used to as a way of coping with stress. And the thing is, Sophie, is that you get through distressing times, you get through adversity with mindset and looking after yourself, but also through connecting. That is absolutely essential. I think people have forgotten it, that you're not an island. We need to be connected. You get through things without feeling diminished by reaching out and letting people help you, letting people in. So isolation, I think, is a really, really bad way of coping with stress. And I think I don't know what you think.
No, I think, and more than ever, we are more isolated, especially because of social media, because everything's on our phones nowadays. And you said, and I think that really leads on to why, if you are struggling with it, a way to cope is to have a support network, is to establish healthy connections with people, because we know when we isolate ourselves, our resilience is down. We're not better able to cope because, we're born on this planet with other people. We have to be able to reach out and have those relationships. So would you say that that's like a very key point in ways to manage stress, is having a positive, establishing that support network?
Definitely, Sophia. I mean, it's hardwired into us biologically. There's certain molecules that develop in the brain after periods of isolation that lead to things like aggression, irritability, paranoia, that put us at higher risk of all kinds of physical and mental health problems. And it's not just human beings, it's all kind of species. We're not supposed to be isolated, understand? We're supposed to be connected. Connection gives our life meaning. We feel, supported through difficult times, especially through difficult times. And I think a lot of people, especially if they're embarrassed about their stress, especially if they're feeling like awkward or,
shameful.
Exactly, yeah. The first thing to do is push people out, and you need to bring people in. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's crazy how we actually push people out when we feel stressed, when that's the last thing we should be doing. We should be reaching out to our connections, because there's very little we can do alone.
Yeah.
You need other people.
100%, Sophia. And I just think, from an employment perspective, I think if you wanted to improve stress levels or decrease stress levels, not improve stress levels, I don't know what
Not why we're here today.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to decrease stress levels, is to make sure staff are doing things together. There's people in organizations who work next to somebody. They may be going through hell, Sophia, and the person next to them has no idea, despite the fact that they work every single day together. It's really, really, really important that we stick together, because in isolation We suffer biologically, we suffer psychologically, and we suffer societally as well because we're not helping each other.
Exactly, and we need to be here for each other. And we've talked about how important it is to establish your connections, reach out to the people around you. I know you touched a little there about exercising as well. I think just making sure that you're looking after yourself, you're eating healthy, all those sort of basic things. Those are just going to give you a bit more control in your life, because when we feel stressed, we feel out of control. We feel stressed because we're overwhelmed with everything. And from your experience with your clients, Adi, what other ways do you think can be really helpful for people to manage stress, just in taking those first steps, small things that they can do to reduce those stress levels?
I think it's acknowledge it. You've got to acknowledge what you're doing to your brain, your body, your social connections, your life. If your body is crying out for rest, you need to listen to it. Don't power through, or at least think about things in the long term. I think a lot of people nowadays, especially when they're in stressful situations or difficult jobs, every day is like a sprint. You understand what I'm saying? And that will obviously affect all kinds of things, not just related to your mental health, but your physical health, your performance and so forth. Acknowledge what you're doing to your body and acknowledge that it has limits. And if you're pushing hard against those limits, it's going to affect pretty much every single system, biological system, psychological system, social systems, and so forth. So acknowledge it. Because the first part of addressing, particularly a mental health issue, is acknowledging the problem. If you don't acknowledge it, you're not going to address any kind of issue. So
that's what I think is. I think the first step is self-awareness. You have to know. I always think when people have come to therapy, I'm like, at least you've noticed that there's something in your life that you're not happy about, something that you're struggling, and you've made that first step. So you're completely right. The first thing is self-awareness. You notice that tension, you notice that strain in your body. You notice that you might be feeling more irritable. You might feel really overwhelmed. You might be actually experiencing the physical symptoms of stress. Be aware about it. Be in tune with it. And when you were saying that stuff there, I also think I could really hear about just being in the here and now. Not thinking about, when you're in the moment, not thinking about everything that's happened today and everything that's happening 2 weeks from now, thinking about that all at once. Of course you're going to feel stressed, of course you're going to feel overwhelmed. So do you think that mindfulness can also be something helpful that people can practice, and just actually, everything that I'm thinking about now, why don't I just think about the present?
Definitely, Sophia.
Because they say anxiety lives in the future.
And it does. Yeah, exactly. And it's just when somebody goes through something really distressing, there is a tendency just to think, what the hell does the future hold for me? I don't know how I'm going to get through this. They start thinking about big things.
It's like they start catastrophizing.
Exactly that. And it's just like, you can understand why the mind goes off into a state of panic, because it's just like, wow, this big thing's happened and it's really going to affect my future. It's really going to affect my relationships and so forth. As you said there, you bring it down. That's how you get through difficult situations. You don't think about the big picture yet. You think about just getting through each day. Bring it back down to what's going on for you now. What do you need now? Granted, in a year's time, you may need something else. You may need...
Maybe even tomorrow you might need someone else.
Exactly, yeah.
Something else.
100%, Sophia. I mean, you need to just think about, bring it back down to you. What do you need now? And act on that basis, and try not to worry about what you need in so many months or years' time, because the stress is now. And your life is now as well. You need to focus on what you need. So yeah, kind of like acknowledge that you're going through something and bring it back down to the present. So yeah.
I think that's a big thing. Whenever I talk to someone that's feeling overwhelmed, I feel like you can feel that their mind's going at 100 miles an hour and they're just listing all of these different stresses, every single thing. And it's like, you're not actually in the present. You're living in the future, maybe a bit in the past.
I know, yeah. It's so sad as well, Sophia, because like I've had the pleasure to kind of be in like palliative care settings. People who are obviously, their lives are nearly over.
Mm-hmm.
And my experience in these settings, and also every bit of research in these settings, suggests that when they look back at their lives and the things that they wish they did, they wish they just slowed down.
Worried less.
Worried less. Yeah, exactly. The things that cause those everyday stress and take us out of the present. So we're not fully connected to people that we want to be connected to, enjoying life, traveling and so forth. They're worried about all these things that just take them out of the present moment, and we're not living their lives as fully as would be ideal. So not only does it cause them stress, it also causes them regret later on in life.
Yeah. And then you're sort of stressed about, and then you get stressed about all the regret that you have.
Exactly.
But,
yeah.
And it feeds back into that cycle. And, it's like by the end of your life, you're probably going to look back on things and think, really, I spent all my time worrying about that.
I know.
And it didn't even matter.
100%, Sophia.
Yeah. And it's a good way just to sort of gain that control back in your life. And I think if you are feeling stressed, good things that you can do is just to get organised with things. I always think, write down every single worry that you're having right now. Everything, doesn't matter how big or how small it is. And work through those things. And, when you've written them all down, you might even feel better from doing that because you've gotten it all out on paper.
Yeah.
Work and do those things. Do I have control of this now? Nope. Okay, leave it. And I'll focus on the next thing that I can control. So do you think as well that working through the things that you can control can be really beneficial? Because there's no point in focusing on the things that you can't control.
100%, Sophia. You have got to organise your mind in the exact way you describe. Stuff that is going to happen in the future, it may be bad. But right now, you have to just focus on what you need in the present moment and the things you can control. Sort your own house. Sort your house. What's the expression? Get your house
in shape.
Get your house. Yeah, get your own house in order. Because once you do that, you have a good foundation to kind of deal with the later stresses subsequent to doing this.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I like that one because when you tidy up your room, you sometimes feel 10 times better.
Yeah.
Or when you give your house a good tidy, you're like, okay, now I've got a foundation. I feel like I can tackle the next thing. Sometimes it's as simple as just breaking everything down. Because part of stress is you feel overwhelmed. So everything that you feel stressed about, write it down, tackle it one thing at a time. I write to-do lists every single day. Even if I have the smallest thing, I'm like, send that email. But
I've seen them on your desk.
Yeah, and then I'll tick it off and I'll feel, feel better. And that's just the way that I do it.
Yeah.
But, it can look different for everyone. So I think it's finding out what works for you. Those things can be a good start. And it was kind of like a point that you were saying at the start of, I feel like stress is a skill. Managing your stress is a skill. It's something that takes time because it's a habit, isn't it? Right? If you're used to unhealthily coping with stress, like the second you start to feel stressed, you start overeating, you start smoking, you start going down to the pub. You have that unhealthy coping habit, and it's about swapping that out for something healthier. So, for example, exercising, taking the time to write it down, thinking about what's in my control, trying to manage it. And I think it takes time, but like you said, the first step is self-awareness. When you actually notice that you are stressed and those things come up and you notice that you have this unhealthy pattern of behaviour, we look to change that into something healthier.
Yeah. Definitely, 100%. And it's about changing those habits.
It's a habit, isn't it?
100%, yeah. Because Sophia, you get into these really, really bad habits when you're stressed out that obviously entrench the stress. And once you entrench the stress, particularly over time, it becomes really, really difficult to get out of that headspace. So basically, especially in those early stages where you start to feel like this stress is leading to distress, look at your habits. Look at the things you're doing to make the situation worse and better. If you're doing the things that are obviously going to make the problem worse, try your best to intervene early, because if you intervene early, you're more likely to have success. Leaving things, falling by the wayside for a very long period of time, particularly if it's unhealthy coping techniques such as drinking, taking drugs, just ignoring the problem. When you do these things over and over and over again, they're really, really, really hard to unwrap, to reverse.
Yeah. It gets harder to reverse the more you do it.
Exactly.
So do the healthier things as much as you can.
Exactly. Yeah.
Healthy habits.
100% for you. And also, with respects to people who go through distressing situations, and people who are worried about failure, and perhaps who have experienced failure, it's also the kind of language you use inside to describe yourself, your experience, what you're going through. The amount of times you've probably heard it yourself, Sophia. Well, I'm absolutely certain that you have in the therapy room. The words people use to describe themselves when they're going through something really distressing is absolutely ruthless, borderline abusive. And it's just being mindful of the language you use to talk about yourself.
Yeah.
Soften that up, because there's an accident in like the self-compassion that, you know, you need to be careful what you say about yourself because you're always listening. You understand what I'm saying? So like when your brain hears you calling yourself an idiot, it responds like, you know, with offense. So you're going through a bit of a difficult situation and you're yourself using this language, this self-abusive language. You need to be careful about that, because if you do it all the time, you know, it's going to have an impact on so many, you know, psychological constructs, self-esteem, confidence, how you feel about, you know, your relationships and so forth. So yeah, be especially kind to yourself when you're going through a stressful situation, because you're feeling especially vulnerable. And like I said, you're always listening to what you say about yourself, so you need to be careful about that. Yeah,
that was a really good point you made, that Adi, in the way that you speak to yourself really matters. And like you said, when you are going through a stressful time, what's the point in kicking yourself where you're already having all this amount of stress? And you know, when you're telling yourself certain beliefs about yourself, your brain doesn't know any better, right? It's just going to internalize whatever the hell that you say to it. So I always think it's good practice to say, you know, what I just called myself then, would I ever say that to someone that I love? No. So why am I saying it to myself? 100%. And no, I think that was a really good point, about just that, having that positive self-talk and it also helps you manage stress better, because it builds resilience, you know, rather than going through a stressful time and then going into that pattern of unhealthy.
Exactly.
You know, saying like, you know what, this is a hard time right now, but I'm proud of myself. I'm going to take things one step at a time. I have the resilience. And if you have that talk, you're going to manage your stress better rather than spiraling. So
it is that, Sophia. Yeah. Just want to say about the taking things step by step. It's you said something there that, you know, I wouldn't speak this way to somebody I love, so why the hell am I doing this to, why the hell am I subjecting this language to myself? But it's also the patience thing. When you're going through a stressful time, the last thing you need is yourself or somebody else saying, get through this, do this, be better, work harder. You need somebody patient. You know, you yourself need to practice that self-patience, because I think a lot of people, when they get into difficult situations, stressful situations, maybe at work or at home, they pressure themselves to get through it quickly as possible. And they need to just slow down and take the time with it. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon in a lot of instances. And people will go at it like a sprint. They just burn out so quickly. So, you know, be patient with yourself, be kinder with yourself, look after yourself, and it'll be okay. Yeah, it will work out. It will work. It does. It does. No, thanks so much, Adi, for those last few points. Now, I really enjoyed our talk today about stress, and I hope that everyone watching has maybe taken some ways to manage their stress a little bit better. But thank you so much, Adi. Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you.